I spent months in a wheelchair after cancer, and the moment I started getting stronger came when I felt like I was falling apart. Most women I coach think resilience means holding it together and bouncing back by morning, but that story is exactly why we're exhausted. The truth is, the signs that you're actually building resilience are the ones that feel most like failure. There are 5 of them, and once you know what to look for, you'll stop judging yourself for backsliding. Let me walk you through each one so you can finally recognize what's really happening. For the last 20 years, we've been told that resilience looks like getting knocked down and standing right back up. It looks like working through the pain and pretending you're fine by Monday morning. Silicon Valley even has a name for it. They call it failing fast, and they celebrate the people who crash and rebuild overnight. But new research is showing the opposite. In 2025, psychologists started tracking professionals who recovered from real setbacks, and they found something strange. Those who took longer to get back on their feet actually built deeper resilience than the ones who bounced back immediately. Forbes published an article this year calling it the shift from cloud mind to sky mind resilience. The old version says push harder and stay later, and the new version says regulate the conditions that let you thrive. That's the reframe we're working with today. Real resilience isn't a faster bounce. It's a slower, fuller recovery that changes you, and the signs that it's working are going to feel completely backwards at first. And if your recovery has been feeling backwards lately, that's not a bug. That's the feature. If you've been punishing yourself because your recovery doesn't look like a montage, you're not broken. You're just using the wrong scorecard. I want to start with the sign that scares women the most, because it's the one that makes you think therapy isn't working or you're going backwards. You start doing the self-care work, you set a boundary, you take a weekend off, and you finally say no to something. And instead of feeling better, you feel worse. You crash on Sunday, you cry in the shower, you wake up tired even after 8 hours of sleep, and your emotions feel bigger, not smaller, all at the same time. And the first thought is always the same. I must have messed this up. You're not doing it wrong. What you're experiencing is your nervous system finally feeling safe enough to let go of what it's stored. Think about it this way. For years, maybe decades, you've been running on adrenaline. You've been the one holding everything together. The business, the family, the clients, the household. Your nervous system learned that rest wasn't safe, because another fire always needed putting out. So when you finally create space, your body does exactly what it had been waiting to do. It releases the backlog. The fatigue you feel on that first real weekend off isn't new fatigue. It's old fatigue that finally has permission to surface. The emotions that feel bigger aren't random. They're the ones you didn't have time to feel when you were busy surviving. There's a video on YouTube about nervous system healing that has nearly 700,000 views, and the title says it all. 5 signs your nervous system is healing that don't feel like healing. One of the top signs is exactly this. You feel like you're falling apart right when you're supposed to be getting better. I see this with entrepreneurs all the time. A woman finally takes her first real vacation in 2 years, and she spends the first 3 days sleeping or crying or both. She thinks she's broken. She thinks the rest didn't work. But what's actually happening is her system is recalibrating. You can't run an engine at redline for years and then expect it to idle smoothly the first day you take your foot off the gas. If you've been crashing after you finally slow down, research is starting to explain why that crash is actually part of the recovery. The most common outcome after serious stress is stable recovery, but the path is never a straight line. You will feel worse before you feel better, and that feeling worse is proof the process is working, not proof that it's failing. It's like a fever breaking. The worst moment is right before the temperature drops. Your body isn't failing in that moment, it's fighting. So if you've been judging yourself for that crash after you finally slowed down, I want you to hear this. That crash is the first sign you're actually getting stronger. And there's another sign that shows up right alongside it. It's one you probably judge yourself for every single day. The next sign shows up in your daily routine, and it's one you probably beat yourself up over. You start wanting to quit things you used to tolerate. Looking at your calendar fills you with dread instead of excitement. Hiring help doesn't feel like growth anymore, it feels like surrender. You used to power through a 60-hour week, and now you can't imagine how you ever did it. And the voice in your head says you're losing your edge. You're not losing your edge. Your system is finally allowing itself to have needs. For years, you suppressed the need to rest because rest felt dangerous. Rest meant falling behind or letting someone else get ahead, and it meant you weren't committed enough. So you built a life where you never had to ask for help because asking felt like weakness. But here's what the research on the resilience paradox is showing. When we apply resilience blindly, when we push through no matter what, it actually harms our health and breaks the systems we're trying to maintain. Researchers ran a study looking at entrepreneurs and their daily recovery and found detachment, relaxation, mastery, and control are the 4 things that actually predict whether you'll burn out or thrive. Notice what isn't on that list. Pushing through isn't on that list. Working harder isn't either. The need to rest more, to delegate, to step back, these aren't signs you're giving up. They're signs your nervous system is finally regulating instead of overriding. I see women confuse this with actual quitting all the time. Real quitting is when you walk away permanently because you're too scared to fix what's broken. What we're talking about here is different. This is strategic stopping. This is your body saying it can't keep running this way, and your mind finally agreeing. There's a reason the compulsion to overwork starts lessening when people heal. It's not because they care less. It's because their system isn't running on panic anymore. And when panic stops driving the bus, rest stops feeling like the enemy. I worked with a founder who finally hired an assistant after 5 years of doing everything herself. She didn't hire the assistant because she'd gotten extra money or extra time. The change came one morning when she sat down at her desk and realized she genuinely couldn't answer another email. She thought she was failing and called me crying, saying she used to be able to handle all of this. But what she was experiencing wasn't failure. It turned out to be her system finally saying out loud what had been whispering for years. That moment of not being able to continue was the beginning of her actually recovering. So if you've been beating yourself up because you want to rest more than you used to, that's not failure. That's sign number 2. But here's the one most women miss entirely, and it's the sign that changes everything when you see it. This next sign is the one most women miss, and it's the one that changes everything when you finally see it. Your boundaries get tighter, not looser. You say no to things you used to say yes to without thinking. A client wants a weekend reply, and you actually tell them you don't work Saturdays. Your family expects you at every event, and you start choosing the ones that matter instead of showing up to all of them. And the hardest part isn't the boundary itself. It's what happens after you set it. People push back. Friends say you've changed, family says you're not as available as you used to be, and colleagues make you feel selfish for having limits. And because you're a woman running a business, you were probably taught that being accommodating is part of your value. Saying no feels like taking away something people count on. But research is telling us something important here. A study published in 2025 tracked entrepreneurs and their daily recovery, finding that control and detachment are 2 of the 4 factors that directly protect your mental health. Control means you decide when work starts and stops. Detachment means you actually leave work behind at the end of the day. These aren't luxuries. They're the exact behaviors that determine whether you burn out or keep going. And yet female entrepreneurs struggle with this more than almost anyone, because perfectionism and people-pleasing create a kind of chronic stress that looks like high performance. You're not saying yes because you have to. You're saying yes because it feels safer than the guilt of saying no. The research on burnout in female founders is very clear about this. The women who collapse aren't the ones who can't handle pressure. They're the ones who never learn that pressure needs an off switch. When you start setting harder boundaries, the guilt you feel isn't proof you're getting it wrong. It's evidence the old pattern is being interrupted. Your nervous system is used to getting validation from overgiving. When you stop overgiving, there's a withdrawal period. It feels uncomfortable. That discomfort is the sign the boundary is real. I want you to think about one boundary you've been avoiding. Maybe it's telling a client you don't answer emails after 6 p.m. Or telling your family you need 2 uninterrupted hours on Tuesday morning. Or simply saying no to a project that doesn't pay enough to justify the stress. No matter what the boundary is, the discomfort you feel when you imagine setting it tells you exactly how much it matters. I worked with a woman who ran a coaching business while raising 2 kids and caring for her mother. She said yes to every request because each one felt reasonable on its own. A quick call here, a favor there, and a client who needed to reschedule for the 3rd time. One day she told me she hadn't eaten lunch sitting down in 3 weeks. She thought the problem was time management. But the real problem came down to every boundary she should have had standing open, with her holding them all open through her own exhaustion. When she finally started saying no, her mother-in-law told her she seemed different. Her sister said she seemed distant. Her best client pushed back when she stopped offering weekend sessions. And she called me after every one of those moments, convinced she was ruining her relationships and her business. But 6 months later, her revenue was higher. She had more energy for her kids. And those who stayed in her life were the ones who actually respected her time. That's what real boundaries do, and they don't just protect your energy, they reveal what's real in your life. The guilt you feel when you set a hard boundary isn't a sign you're being harsh. It's a sign you're finally telling the truth about what you can actually give without breaking. So if you've noticed yourself saying no more often and it feels terrible, that's not you getting harder. That's you getting stronger. And sign number 4 is going to challenge something you probably believe about how fast you should recover from setbacks. Number 4 challenges the biggest lie we all believe about bouncing back fast. You used to bounce back fast. A client fired you and you'd already lined up a new prospect by dinner. Someone criticized your work and you brushed it off by lunch. A launch failed and you were already planning the next one before the numbers finished loading. That looked like resilience. Everyone told you they called it resilience. But what it really turned out to be, most of the time, was bypassing. Psychologists have been tracking this, and what they're finding is turning the old model upside down. Research from late 2025 shows that professionals who fail slowly, who actually sit with the setback instead of rushing past it, build deeper resilience than the ones who bounce back immediately. It's not about wallowing, it's about integration. When you bury a loss and move on fast, the lesson gets buried too. When you let yourself feel the disappointment, your brain actually processes what happened and you come back with different priorities. Forbes published a piece this year about what they call sky mind resilience. The old version, cloud mind, tells you to push harder and stay later. The new version tells you to regulate the conditions that let you thrive. And one of those conditions is giving yourself enough time to actually recover before you rebuild. But most entrepreneurs miss something here. Rebuilding fast feels productive, but it usually means you're rebuilding the exact same system that just broke you. This is especially hard for entrepreneurs because your business and your identity are fused together. When you lose a client, it doesn't just feel like a business setback. It feels like a referendum on whether you're good enough. So bouncing back fast isn't just a strategy. It's a defense against feeling inadequate. But when you finally allow yourself to take longer, what's happening is your identity is separating from the outcome. You're learning that a failed launch doesn't make you a failure. It makes you an entrepreneur who experienced a failed launch, and that distinction is everything. I see women go through this and panic because the recovery is taking days instead of hours. They think they've lost their edge. But here's what's actually happening. They're finally recovering all the way instead of patching over it. The patch job looks strong from the outside, but it's brittle. Full recovery takes longer, but it holds. The women I see recover fully don't come back the same. They come back clearer, knowing what they'll tolerate and what they won't. They also know which clients drain them and which ones energize them. The setback became information instead of just pain, and that only happens when you give it enough time to teach you something. So if your setbacks are sitting with you longer than they used to, that doesn't mean you're weaker. It means you're no longer willing to pretend you're fine when you're not. And the last sign is the one that flips the biggest myth about what emotional strength looks like. The last sign attacks the biggest myth about emotional strength. We've been taught that emotional control means feeling less. The strong woman keeps it together, the professional entrepreneur doesn't take it personally, and the resilient founder stays steady no matter what hits her. And for years, you probably prided yourself on exactly that. You could walk into a crisis and feel nothing, get bad news and keep working, or cry in the car for 5 minutes before getting back to business. But here's what's really happening when you feel less. Your nervous system has armored itself because numbing isn't strength, it's a survival response, and survival responses are expensive to maintain. They cost you sleep, digestion, connection, creativity, and eventually your health. When you start healing, the armor cracks, and when it does, you feel more. You cry at commercials, you get angry when a client speaks to you rudely, and you feel joy so sharply it almost scares you. The first reaction is always fear. You think you're losing control and becoming fragile, but you're not. You're becoming alive, and that aliveness is exactly what you've been missing. There's a pattern I see in the women I work with. They spend years staying professional and not taking things personally, and then one day they realize they have actual feelings about their business. They realize they care so much it hurts, that the fear they've pushed down is real, and that their dream matters more than they admitted. And they panic because feeling this much seems like it would break them. But feeling doesn't break you. Numbing breaks you slowly in ways you can't see, and feeling breaks the illusion that you're fine, which is what kept you stuck. When you finally let yourself feel the terror about cash flow, the grief about a lost partnership, or the anger about working so hard for so little return, those feelings contain information your business needs. The terror tells you where the risk is, the grief tells you what mattered, and the anger tells you where your boundaries should have been. I worked with a founder who hadn't cried in 3 years, not because nothing sad happened, but because she trained herself out of it. She'd been raising 2 kids, caring for a sick parent, running a struggling business, and managing a marriage on autopilot, and she told me with pride she could handle it all without falling apart. But when she finally let herself feel, rage came first. Rage that she carried everything alone and that nobody had asked if she was okay. After the rage came sadness that she had spent 3 years proving she'd been fine when she wasn't. That rage and sadness turned her honest, and 6 months later, she restructured her business, set real boundaries with her family, and told her husband what she needed. She didn't become more emotional, she became more accurate. Her feelings were finally telling her the truth, and she was finally listening. All 5 signs connect right here. Feeling worse before you feel better, wanting to rest, needing harder boundaries, taking longer to recover, and feeling more deeply aren't separate problems. They're the same process. Your system is finally recalibrating after running on override for years. So if you've noticed that you feel more lately, and it terrifies you, I want you to know something. That's not you breaking down, that's you waking up, and waking up is the deepest strength you can build. For years, you've used a resilience scorecard that punishes you for things proving you're healing. Pick one sign you recognized, and instead of judging it today, ask what it needs. Comment below and tell me which sign hit home. And subscribe, because next week we're talking about the routines that make all 5 of these signs easier to live with.